welcome, and thank you for coming. So, for just to kind of give an overview, the Chicago Archives and Artists Festival is kind of a expanded version of what we at 60 Inches from Center usually do. In the past, we've had different projects with WBEZ and Chicago Public Media, where we've had open intake, ephemera collection situations around the city at their neighborhood bureaus to collect ephemera and donate it to the archives at Harold Washington Library. But as part of this expanded version, we thought that it would be good to have a series of dialogues and conversations around the conversations that really circulate around the archival process and that kind of work. And one of the things that has been a constant challenge for 60, but then also a challenge for the archives that we work with at the library, is thinking about documenting and archiving time-based work, and which means, like performance and sound and even music and theater. So we thought it would be a good idea to just sit down and have a conversation. And since Chicago Dance History Project is working through that in great ways and focusing on that, we thought it would be great to kind of offer the opportunity to give an introduction to the Dance History Project, to the processes that you're working with, and then to invite that to be an open dialogue with other people that are maybe thinking about those things for their own practice, or depending on what your practices are. So I thought we could start off by doing introductions so that everyone kind of knows who's in the room, and then Jenai will talk about the projects, and then kind of like that. So we'll start with the introductions, and we'll have you do yours last, so that you can then dive into the project. So who wants to start? Tell us about yourself.
I'll start. I'm Adina. I just graduated with a BS in dance and a minor in history from Ball State.
Oh, wow.
And I've been kind of interested in museum work lately, kind of struggling between the idea of dancing professionally and finding a real job.
Yeah.
So I saw this on my Facebook, and I'm like, that's really interesting. This is kind of what I want to do. I've been in dance my whole life, so I think my future work will have to involve dance somehow.
That's great.
I'm Andrea, and I work for NYU, and I work in their archival processing department. They recently combined all of their special collections into one, because these have three that operated separately. So through NYU, I worked with a lot of artist papers, but even before NYU, I worked for a small artist estate. So I kind of started seeing issues dealing with artist archives that maybe weren't a foundation and didn't have a lot of resources. And now that I've graduated from NYU, their archives program, I started working with other artists in New York and that area.
Okay. Well, welcome to Chicago.
I'm Noelle. I'm a Chicago basically where I don't really have any archival experience, but I'm just interested in seeing how the process works. And I'm really
My name's Marguerite. I'm not a dancer. I'm a visual artist, painter, and drawing. But I'm interested in archiving. And I also inherited, my mother was an artist and never worked. She passed away a couple of years ago. So I'm trying to figure out what to do with her drawings. So I'm interested in learning whatever I can about archiving.
Yeah.
It's really important. I'll just add, I was at the Field Museum last night, the members night, and you can go up behind the scenes and just see how meticulous they are about everything they do. We talked to a woman that did the mounting for all the projects and the exhibits, and it's incredible the detail that they go through about how careful they are with all the materials they use, and it was an inspiration to learn more about it.
we're just doing introductions to get a
Yeah.
sense of who's in the room.
Okay, I'm Corinne Peterson. I'm a visual artist who has just finished a 2.5-year project that sort of expanded my need for archiving help. There were dancers that performed at all but one of 7 receptions. And the last reception, we also had a whole performance sequence. It was all around trauma and art. And so I think there were 7 performers. And I had a videographer there who, I haven't even seen the footage, that was in December. He videotaped the whole thing. And I haven't a clue as to how to talk to him about what I wanted to do. I mean, that's really, and we, the whole project, we have an archive, an interactive archive that we've started, but that's a part that I'm just really kind of stuck with, even knowing how to think about it.
Talk about that, sure. My turn? Oh, Juan Carlos.
The question is just
Is who are you and what do you do?
I'm Juan Carlos, I work at 60. Also, it's interesting, I wasn't allowed to take any dance classes growing up. And I was only able to, only recently, a few years ago, start taking them. And I took open division and adult classes at the Joffrey. And those are great, because coming from a background of someone who didn't dance at all, formal study, to someone who's next to literally people who do it every single day, was a very interesting, last time. But yeah, that's kind of my relationship with dance outside of just dancing. Whatever.
Yeah, it's okay. Hi, I'm Jenai.
Can I interrupt with it? I know I'm going to need to take notes,
Yeah,
and I don't have a pen or a pencil with
Oh.
me. Is there?
there's one on the table. Yeah.
I could borrow.
And we've
I don't want
pencils and pens
information I have to remember
everywhere.
and I have to use. I've got paper.
Oh, here's a pen. And then also, I think that Kate was saying that we could potentially be using microphones and opening the door because it locks when it closes.
Oh, so people can't get in.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, you can do that if you want. Feels so I'm already on. Yeah. I know it seems ridiculous, but
That would help the recording too, actually. I'm multitasking. I've got that camera going and this camera going. Turn that one on. To sort of, I guess, meta document in a way. So my name's Jenai Cutcher. I am a dancer. In terms of documenting dance, I was doing it before I realized I was doing it. I was an English major when I started dancing in college. And so my way into dance was really through writing. Seeing performances, writing about them, whether for class or just for my own obsessed self. So I was doing that more as just a way to participate in the culture of dance, and didn't realize that in and of itself was a form of documentation. Once I became a professional tap dancer in New York, I actively became a documentarian because I wanted to make a movie about women in tap dance. So it was kind of just out of necessity that happened. But through those processes, I acquired, the skills of describing dance in writing or running a camera and doing all of that stuff, which led me to my job here with the Chicago Dance History Project, which I direct. It's 2 years old. We're a not-for-profit research organization, and we formed to document, preserve, and present histories of dance in Chicago. We are heavily involved in the documentation stage right now. Mostly involves conducting oral history interviews one-on-one with people associated with Chicago dance, not just dancers and choreographers, but educators, advocates, producers, documentarians, I mean, you name it. So we're constantly doing those. Sort of as a public extension of the one-on-one interviews, we host events similar to this that we record as well. So that's the documentation phase. We're also preserving by digitizing dancers' files when they come our way, which is kind of a natural outgrowth of conducting the interviews, going into someone's home and where they are, the photos, the programs, etc. So that's happening. What we're working towards in terms of presenting is a comprehensive digital archive where all of these video files will live and be fully accessible to the public. So that's, in a nutshell, the Chicago Dance History Project.
So I could ask some questions. So don't let these microphones deter you from jumping in and asking questions. But I think that I want to, and these questions I'm going to pose, I will pose them to you, Jenai, but also if anyone has thoughts or input for that, I completely welcome it. So one of the things about dance, and I'm curious, in this process, right now you're dealing with a lot of oral histories, but you're also at the same time thinking about the work as it's happening. So performance that happens in the city. How do you? So I guess my question, one of the things that we talked about before, is thinking about documentation and archiving simultaneously, because it is. So as an artist, you document your work in order to, for your own reasons, to create a portfolio online, to have things to show the world for the sake of grant applications or residency application, all these different things. But that extends itself and lends itself to a future archive of your work that people can then research, use, see. So I guess, are there any tips that you would, or things that artists could be thinking about as they're thinking about documenting their work for those reasons that would then maybe make it more friendly for archival purposes in the future?
Okay, so one of the main reasons the Chicago Dance History Project exists and was even started was because you pick up any sort of edited volume about contemporary dance in America, and chances are, the bulk of it is going to refer to dance that happens in New York. I mean, we can speculate on the theories as to why, but probably part of that involves the fact that either the archives of Chicago dance and dance makers don't exist, or they're not accessible, or the folks who aren't aware that they're out there somewhere. So that's why we started doing what we're doing in the first place, hoping that by virtue of doing the research and producing these materials and making them accessible, that might start to happen a little bit more. So there's that. I think accessibility is probably a huge key, which, today it's a lot easier to make files or any kind of materials accessible than it was 50 years ago. But I think, keeping that accessibility in mind, how much you want folks to access the remnants of a performance or something, or not, is one thing. But I guess that's kind of always doing both things, making work and documenting other people's work. That's always a question I have in my mind, is what kind of a life do I want this work to have after it's over? Because, it does exist in time, and that's beautiful in and of itself, and we can't change that, but certain aspects of it can exist beyond its life. And that's the question I always ask, is what kind of a life do I want this to have? And how can I kind of keep that question in the forefront of my mind throughout the process, rather than thinking about it after.
Right. And so part of the access that you're talking about, I think goes hand in hand with awareness of just knowing that these different places exist for the work to go. So for the Dance History Project, do you have dancers or movement artists who send you things specifically?
Now we're starting to. That was sort of an organic outgrowth of the project that we should have expected but didn't. Going into people's homes and interviewing them. Now I've started to ask, do you have photos we can look at? Do you have programs that helps jog your memory? So they do have those out now, but even when I didn't ask, it would come up, and they would say, like, "Oh, do you want to see all the boxes in my basement? What should I do with them?" So we did realize, like, oh, okay, we're really in a place where we can assist with this somehow. And so now we are getting, now that people are starting to know that we exist, we are getting things coming to us. We don't ever want to be a physical archive or a brick and mortar institution in any way. We do want to digitize those materials with their permission though. So I kind of see us as a way station between the artists and a physical archive, should they choose to share their materials with somebody.
I keep thinking about your question of the actual physical artworks, and I think about that a lot because there are a lot of physical materials that circulate around all disciplines. So whether it's dance, there are things like the costumes or just props or things that might be incorporated into a performance. And that I see along the same lines as the paintings or the drawings or the actual physical materials. And I think that's one of the big challenges that I see is having enough open repositories that you can call and say, I have my mother's collection of materials, what do I do with it? Will you take some of these things? And for us, that's a huge challenge that we deal with, because what we do is ephemeral materials and not original artworks. So are there ways that you defer people to other places, or even for you, have you reached out to certain archives or repositories
No, I haven't yet. I'm not even sure.
who to reach out to about that?
And that's a process in and of itself. That's a relationship that, it takes time to establish the trust and respect necessary to know that those materials are going to be cared for and accessed in the way you want and all that too. So that's another way that we've realized, like, oh, we're the ones actually interacting with these people and establishing a relationship. So when they have questions like that, they come to us because they know us and they're starting to trust us. That's just now starting to develop. What the Chicago Dance History Project is kind of defined as our role in this is just one of information, really. It's up to the artist or, the artisters or whoever, what they want to happen with those materials. But if we can provide them information with, you might want to consider Chicago History Museum, they're the ones who are taking costumes right now, or, whatever it is. Letting them know who's taking what, or who's interested in what, or who to contact in each institution. I think that's more of our role, just as a conduit. We're in a position to be able to communicate the significance of these institutions to the individuals, and vice versa. And the archivists of these institutions are excellent at what they do. They may or may not know about dance. It's not necessarily part of their purview. So then we go back to them and communicate the significance of these individuals to them. Hey, this guy's work is really important. Things like that. So that's where we sort of situated ourselves, but that's kind of an ongoing decision.
And I'm curious, have you or have any of you that have maybe explored people's homes or been in the homes of artists or makers, have you come across any individual person that has almost become an institution by themselves, or like a home museum or something like that, where they have, because I've done work at the DuSable Museum, and specifically in their collections, and a lot of the curatorial work I do has to do with museum collections and different institutional collections. And one thing that, after I started spending time at DuSable, that I would hear regularly is that they get calls every day with people who have entire houses full of things. And they're like, this is the place for it to go, right? Like, you're DuSable, you collect African American history. So you want this, but they only have the capacity to take so many things. So they have to be very selective because resources, space, all of these challenges that they deal with institutionally. So then I think in my mind of different people I know, specifically here in Chicago, like there's a collector named Patrick McCoy who has a home that from floor to ceiling is artwork. He is a collector. He has thousands, over 1,200 pieces of artwork up in his home at any given moment, and then one's rotating in and out over time. But his home has almost become its own museum because, first of all, I mean, it's different because he's collecting these things, but he's had to, I imagine that his collection, maybe it'll go in the future to some institution, but maybe his home will have to turn into a museum by itself in order to house those materials if no one else will take them to the specifications of what he wants it to be. So I'm just curious if anyone has seen someone kind of take it into their own hands when or without relying on an institution that maybe doesn't have the capacity to take that work. No?
Yes.
You have? Yeah. Okay.
A couple. So one of the great dance collections in the city is the Midwest Dance Collection at the Newberry Library, which was basically instigated from one individual's personal archives, Anne Roselle, who was a documentarian. She was a writer. She literally shot from the hip. She had a video camera, probably like one of the first consumer-ish sort of video cameras, and shot from the wings or shot from the front row of the theater. I mean, the vastness of her collection, the legend has it, she brought to the Newberry in 2 grocery bags at a time for years and years and years. I think it's actually true. Sparked this Midwest Dance Collection. So that would be one. And every time I look at the shelves, I just think, what did her apartment look like? So that's one. A personal archive that I've discovered through doing this work with the Chicago Dance History Project is the collection of Charles Grass. Anybody know who he is? That's why we exist. Who's heard of Bob Fosse?
Of course.
Yeah.
Sort of what?
Bob Fosse. He's a Chicago native, Broadway choreographer of the 70s and 80s. So growing up in Chicago, he and Charles Grass had a vaudeville duo act called the Riff Brothers. Charlie saved everything. So not only does it archive his career, he went on to work with Ruth Page, ballet choreographer here in town, and did a lot of dance education stuff, but he is probably the last primary source material for Bob Fosse's early career, because the Fosse family threw everything out.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah, but he's got, everything. His aunt made the boys' costumes. He still has those. Everything. Notation of soft shoes, everything.
Wow.
Yeah, and we discovered it just because I heard of him and I asked him for an interview, and so I went over and all this stuff was out. It's not quite a museum's worth, but it's a vast collection of lots of different kinds of materials that get as close as we can get to understanding what the actual dance was like.
Right. So I do want to open it up. Do you have questions or specific things you have in mind or are bringing to the table that you maybe want this group of individuals to kind of think through or think around?
I guess one of the issues I had last semester was documenting our senior choreo projects, because we're supposed to have like a videographer from the school, but they came in, they didn't look at any of the lights or anything, they just kind of sat there, and it turned out really bad, really shaky, didn't get the feed. So I don't know if you know how to do it differently, or if you've had issues with that and what you've done about that.
Yes. So I kind of think of, with dance specifically, or probably any performance, I think of the videographer as another collaborator. So just like we wouldn't have the lighting designer light the piece cold once the curtain goes up in a performance or anything like that, you don't want to have some stranger come in and turn the camera on right before your performance starts either, which it sounds like that's kind of what happened. Shooting in the theater is tough, right? And it does take a lot of preparation. So first thing I would recommend, if you can realistically make that happen, is to establish a relationship with your videographer well in advance of a performance. Have them come to rehearsals, have them be in the space, especially a tech rehearsal or a dress rehearsal, things like that. I understand that's not usually a reality or possible, so then I would recommend learning enough to be dangerous on your own, which is kind of where I sit. I don't consider myself a professional, but I can get the job done. And that means, learning the basics of operating a camera and practicing. Just like you never really stop doing tondus, you kind of have to keep these skills fresh by repeating them over and over and over. So then if you are in a situation where it's last minute and you got to turn the camera on right before the lights go up, you can at least get a decent documentation of it, if that helps. And there are resources out there for learning it, or I can teach you. You can stand behind that right now.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. It is a luxury to be able to work with, no matter what work we're talking about, whether it's dance or other things, to be able to bring in and think about documentation first and foremost versus it being the last thing, and that's usually what results in the best kind of documentation, right? I think that, last night we had a screening with On the Real Film, which is a film duo that we work with often. And the great thing about them, it's a special relationship. They just happened in our lives. But working with them is great because they're thoughtful about their approach, and they are willing to kind of work with us to figure out different ways to solve different documentation problems. So I think that I would say, at least for me, I think that we don't play around with the lines between documentation and a new work being made out of the document, considering the documentation a piece by itself. And I think there are a lot of opportunities to do that if you find the right videographer, person who's interested in working with capturing what it is that you're doing. And there's something about being able to reach out to someone and say, can you just document this panel that we're doing, versus we want to bring you in, we're organizing this panel, and pitching it as kind of a challenge to them to figure out how they would approach it. And I find that the filmmakers that we've worked with really kind of appreciate that opportunity to kind of even expand the way that they think about documenting things. And then the second piece, I completely agree about just being able to be self-sufficient. At the end of the day, you'll always have yourself to rely on, and to be able to capture things so that you're not post-performance thinking, man, if only somebody would have been there to do it. You'll always have yourself. So.
one more nuts and bolts thing. If you only have, you know, one camera and one chance and it's for documentation, you can talk to the videographer and say, you know, I want a static shot on the whole stage, wing to wing, make sure you're getting our full bodies. We do change levels and we do jump, so make sure there's enough headroom. Like just knowing those like few bits of vocabulary or lexicon. Like you said, you're not quite sure how to talk to your videographer either. Having, even just making a list ahead of time, what a basic, safe documentation shot entails would probably help, especially if it's a videographer who's never shot dance before. It's, you know, it's its own animal.
I always want to see the feet.
Yeah. But then if you have two cameras, then you conventionally you have a wide, safe shot.
Yeah.
And then the second camera is for you to get close-ups or, you know, whatever it is.
Are there other questions to post in LinkedIn?
Yeah, so I was interested when you said like you were documenting like dance through writing without even really like knowing it, that you were actually archiving work. And I feel like that's true for so many of us now using like iPhones, like we're constantly taking videos and pictures and sharing them on all these platforms. So like, how do you think the future of archiving is going to change like within the scope of art? You know, like there's so much of it, and I feel like it's being shared a lot, but like where is it going?
That's a really good question. I wonder what you guys think.
Like, is Instagram an archive?
I mean, so this is a great question. That sounds like that's a panel title. Is Instagram an archive? Question mark.
What was the whole title?
Is Instagram an archive? So you know,
Right.
Or any social media.
any social media. I say yes. And I saw Kate shaking her head and she's like, nope.
We had another panel this morning about like your digital life.
Right.
And the message there was, if you have a website, it is not an archive.
Yeah. But I mean, and I,
Especially if it's all place where you have it.
right. So it can't be your only place. But I do think, I mean, I'm just thinking about, I see social media as like a kind of curatorial practice that people don't realize that they're participating in. And to me, curatorial practice is archive. It does work with the record in different ways. So I see it as a kind of archive. It shouldn't, I agree, it shouldn't be the sole archive, but it is a way of making directly accessible a certain, you know, documentation of different things if you choose it to be. So I would argue that it is, and we should consider it one, but it shouldn't be your, I don't see Instagram taking, I don't see the Newberry Instagram taking the place of the Newberry Library anytime soon.
I have another thought too.
Challenge me on this too.
I don't know that I would ever think of any one platform as a sole archive anyway, right? Like it's, Terry Barrett talks about a community of interpreters, and I think of a community of archives. You know, no representation of one thing exists in one place, right? So in that sense, yeah, Instagram accounts totally inform a person's artwork. But I would say looked at in context of the other platforms that are out there where they're maybe even more actively archiving their work. As a source of material and research, hell yeah, I've pulled stuff from Facebook and Instagram that pertain to Chicago dance history. You know, people are archiving that, and that's where they're archiving for the most part. And it's one of the best tools to get more of a communal archive going, because, you know, like someone will post a photo and someone else will say, oh, that's so and so and so and so and so and so. And that's like work I could spend a half a day trying to find out. You know? So yeah, it's an archive and a tool for us, for sure. And I'm cool with that.
Does anybody else have thoughts on that? Yeah.
Mine's a different subject.
Oh,
so,
sure.
You want to get, can I go ahead? Or does somebody else have
No,
something?
go
I met him the day before that event, and he took pictures of a group of Canadians adding their parts to this installation, and with the idea that he would put something together, just a little story together about that. I'm sort of out of money, but I need to describe what I'm going to raise money for. So there's that that one little piece that could just be a couple minute piece about the Canadians adding their pieces and their stories. There's a lot of stories that he has. And then the next night was the exhibit and all these performances, and also different people talking. There were several. It was the last one after 2.5 years, and so I don't think it's probably a good idea to have one piece that is everything. And as I was listening to you, I was thinking there could be a separate piece on every performance to make it watchable. And I just really would welcome any ideas for how to make something meaningful out of this that people would watch. And I like your initial question, what life do I want this to have? But I didn't know how to answer it. I mean, I asked that before the event, but I didn't know how to tell him what to do, like close-ups and far-aways, and be sure you catch these people, and that this person gets included, and there's just all kinds of, I don't know if you've got some questions that I might ask myself that it would help, and him, because he's got all the footage, and I could meet with him and we could have a useful conversation, but I feel like I need to know what to even ask him.
Yeah, I think simply seeing the footage will help out a lot. Seriously,
Yes.
You don't know what's there.
Right.
You might have a whole bunch
Yeah.
of close-ups of feet. Who knows?
Right.
So that's one thing. I think that will probably just spark ideas and questions for you in and of itself. And so you guys should sit together and really view it. Personally, that's what I think.
Yeah.
And again, with the understanding that this is a partial representation of an event that took place in a certain time and space. So again, asking that question, I firmly believe where there's one project, there's 7.
Yeah.
And this sounds like a project that might have, come out of the actual event itself, right? It probably can stand alone. It needs to stand alone in some aspects, right? So what are those qualities that this video or whatever it is needs to have in order to communicate what you want to communicate?
Right, because you want it to have a life by itself without having to see all the other parts.
Yeah, but it sounds like you also want to refer back to the event itself too.
Yes.
And so what are
The
those?
event refers back to the meaning of the entire project.
It's a rabbit hole. It's tricky without having been there, but I guess maybe that's the question too. What would you want someone what would you want us to walk away with? Having only seen this video that's
Right. Well, one thing is that we have the website, and that's an archive, the entire project, and it's under development.
Yeah.
And so it would be to have a way, first of all, first life it would have would just be part of that website that people would discover this and finding it meaningful.
Yeah.
But there might be other lives too.
So that's already context right there.
Right.
You know.
I just want to show you
Yeah.
a picture so you can see what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
I mean, hopefully this helps, I don't know, but the approach we're taking with the Chicago Dance History Project too is that, you know, it's context, right? We're building a whole digital archive. Oral history interviews are only one component of it, and we hope that, you know, for example, if, you know, I'll use Charlie Grass again. If Charlie Grass is talking about the soft shoe he and Bob Fosse did in 1943, and he talks about it for 20 minutes, I also want folks to be able to see the handwritten and typed score of that soft shoe.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I happen to be a tap dancer, so I can
Right.
read it fairly, understand it fairly well. I plan to recreate it. That's going to be there too. So everything is its own thing, but
So there was like incorporating other things into what he does that he did.
yeah. And by virtue of the archive, the digital archive as a platform, people are able to connect the dots on their own or create their own meaning. And it sounds like with your website that might also be the case. Yeah, if that helps at all.
It does.
Okay.
I mean, otherwise I'm just having conversations with myself and it's not helpful at all.
Yeah. And you know, I always think, who is my audience? Who's your audience? And that will help guide whatever you want to make with your collaborator. Yeah.
And how you want it to function, because it sounds like your project is ongoing. And I don't know if whatever you use this footage to create will help to continue it or push it forward, or if it's just meant to be kind of documentation. Because I think about the ways in which different people create short mini docs about artists, like artists in their studio and then showing the work and explaining it versus a piece that's actually just the documentation of the thing. So it's, you know, there are different ways to use this footage that could incorporate your voice as a narrator more. So maybe there's more that is added to it to make it into a mini doc, or maybe it, you know, these are
Right.
It stands alone as the documentation cut and edited, so that people are watching it and understanding this is the beginning of this performance and that you're watching. So I think there's so many different things that you could do with everything.
Well,
that
yeah, I mean, I can imagine using it for fundraising.
Mhm.
I can imagine using it for finding a permanent place for actual installation.
Mhm.
And imagining time-based work being done in relation to an impermanent place.
Roughly speaking, at least in dance, there are kind of three ways that we think about dance on camera.
Uh-huh.
It was dance, right? It was
Yeah,
performance. Yeah. Okay. And we talk about
One was dance, but there was spoken word and there
Okay.
was
so
several.
the first category is documentation, which is basically just, you know, as accurate as possible, a record of what happened then. Then the term I use is video translation, which is kind of a more creatively curated use of the footage that translates something that happened in time and space to the screen. And then dance video or dance for camera is dance that was choreographed for the camera as its original venue, not for the stage. So, you know, again, like all of those lines are blurred, but it might help you to think about where do you want this project to fall in that? Is it a record? Is it, you know, a translation of what happened? Or is it, you know, wasn't quite made for the camera? So I think you're one of the first two.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think we're at 1 o'clock, so we have to shift to our next discussion. But did anyone have any other questions or thoughts to toss out to wrap up?
I guess one of my original questions was, are you going to make a dance museum? Because there's very few in the world, but you said you didn't want a brick and mortar. kind of situation. Is there a reason?
We don't have the capacity.
Mhm.
we don't have the capacity. A. B. I very much like the idea of someone who is researching dance in any capacity to come across our material online. They can be anywhere at any time, and it kind of breaks those barriers of time and space. And these days seems the most realistically accessible option for us. I will say though that I do want a Chicago dance food truck someday. So like a museum and a food truck that we will, park outside of Lukanti or anywhere, right? So we can take some of these materials to people and have them experience the actual thing.
I think it sounds like something that you should do.
There are enough people who are much better at doing that than we are. I mean, that's a profession in and of itself, and I just, frankly, don't know what to do.
But I'm sure there would be a lot of people who would be interested in, sitting at that table when those things are thought about or discussed or even dreamt about.
Yeah.
So I want to say thank you all for sitting down with us for this quick round table. And if you have any other questions, I don't know if you'll be around, but
I'll be around, and there's a CDHP mailing list on the table if you want to sign up. You can always find me there.
So enjoy the rest of the festival. The next one that we have coming up is called Your Life on File, and it's talking about artists getting things organized for life and for emergency purposes. So packaging things in a way that your family, your friends, the people can caretake of your materials and your legacy and for any reason. So stick around for that. Otherwise, get your portrait taken, enjoy the rest of the festival,